Hey guys, PlayStation live from E3, broadcasting live from the PlayStation booth in Los Angeles. Thank you so much for joining us, and I am joined by none other than Mr. Cliff Blazensky.
Yes, and my COO, Ariane Brisset, is joining.
Come on in.
Come on, hey, we're doing it live here. We'll sit right down.
What could happen? Anything could happen.
Who's to say on PlayStation Live from E3?
Exactly.
That's right, so Lawbreakers.
Yes, it's a game. We made it.
It is a game. It is coming to PS4.
Yes.
Not long from now either, if I'm not mistaken.
It's coming out on August 8th.
Oh, right around the corner.
Yep.
And this is well, I don't want to put words in your mouth. You tell me. Give me the elevator pitch on Lawbreakers.
So it's a character-based first-person shooter.
Okay.
That's essentially about gravity-defying combat. You know, some games have tacked on, like, you know, low grav modes and everything. We built the entire game around that. So you not only have low grav pockets in the maps, you have characters that can pound down and create low grav pockets. You have grappling hooks, you have jetpacks, jump jets, double jumps, dodges, everything in between that basically makes the game the shooter that is essentially the floor is lava, the game.
I think if you, 'cause you and I have known each other for a long time.
That was gold. That was gold. You have to give him.
I may have done this a few times before.
The floor is lava. The game. Come on. Man.
So you, I got to know you working on all the Unreal games.
Yeah, we go way back.
Games. We go way back. Yeah. One time we played UT on PC back in the day, and I beat you. I beat you.
Got that I let you win.
Okay.
You let me win.
I was gonna say what?
But I think of you as sort of a mechanical genius when it comes to a lot of these games, whether it's like an active reload or whether it's a lot of the mechanics we saw in Unreal Tournament.
It's the tangible things.
Games are meant to be played, right?
Yeah.
They're not meant to be, it's not just pretty pictures.
Well, the problem was that for years, like, and he saw this at EA when he was at EA, everybody in this industry has this Hollywood envy.
Yeah.
It's like, I make video games, but I really want to make film, and it's like, no, video games are cooler than movies.
Yes, they are.
You know, you'll probably see Spielberg down there because he, you know, wanted to make
He
games.
loves games.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that, like, let's just make something that's tangible, that people can get hands-on with, and that's very much skill-based. And we're no longer worried about seeing the pores on people's faces or the eyes welling up in the cinematic. Like, you know, that costs an F-ton of money. Like, we want to make a game for a decent budget that looks great, that runs at an amazing frame rate, that people can match make against people of similar skill and have a blast online immediately and quickly.
That said, seeing that PS4 trailer of Lawbreakers made me want a Lawbreakers movie. I'm just gonna say that.
I'll take it.
That was a great trailer.
That was a really good trailer.
So my history is right after we made our first game together, I founded Guerrilla Games, and I did make all the Killzone games and all that. And then, I was even at the inception of Horizon back in the day.
I didn't know that.
Oh, really?
And all that, yeah.
Oh, wow.
So, you know, I've been making shooters all my life, right? And he made Gears, and I made Killzone. We were like this always kind of competition, right? So it's good for me to be back on PlayStation, right? I love it. I've been doing some programming myself, so.
Oh, that's great.
Well, he runs the company for me, and it's one of those things where, like, he'll be dealing with, like, production issues and everything, and he'll be like, hey, come over here. I made it so you could scale the HUD. I'm like, Jesus, man, do you sleep?
Let's get back to some of the mechanical discussion. I mean, this is going to go all over the place, let's be honest. But you talked about these sort of gravity bubbles or anti-gravity bubbles, but there's a lot more going on that's interesting. I mean, I haven't actually played the game yet. I'm sorry to confess to you. I know.
I have though.
I'm going to play, especially since it's only $29.99. It's a great price. It comes out on PS4.
Yeah.
But I heard you can shoot behind yourself.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, like, seems like a gimmick initially. So does taking cover.
Yeah.
Oh, Gears throwback. But it's one of those things that when you combine the characters and the movement and the gravity, it actually is an incredibly useful thing that you occasionally do get a blind fire kill, which is rare. And it's pretty exciting when you're like Ash in Evil Dead, like, ooh, it feels good. But this came about from me reading the books, you know, The Expanse and Leviathan Wakes, where they're talking about what happens if you fire a weapon in microgravity. Well, you go the opposite direction.
Yeah.
And so even with our heavier classes, such as the Titans, who have the rocket launcher, we've seen YouTube videos of people, by using microgravity in the rocket launcher and blind firing and rocket jumping, they can traverse the map just as fast as our fastest characters.
Interesting.
So, you know, the learning curve's an issue, though, for us, because there's not a lot of games you can do that in. And so for us, you know, we have a tutorial where you can kind of, you know, mess around and kind of practice your lines before you go on stage. But firing behind you not only looks cool, but it's also an incredibly cool way to get around the map.
Right. I mean, I imagine when people start mastering that, that's something you can possibly see in many other games.
Oh.
It's kind of like the cover system. You guys are kind of like on the frontiers of that.
And I will take that, but nobody ever ripped off Active Reload.
Right?
Feel free, it's out there, you know?
Has there been? I don't know. I feel like I have seen a game that did that.
I haven't seen it, man, but it's like one of those things where, like, I think everybody assumed everybody else was going to take it, and so no one did. So I'm like, okay. But I mean, you know, we've been in this business a while. You know, the idea of microgravity and firing weapons in it, it's not a new idea. It was in Unreal Tournament and Quake. But I was like, what would happen if you were to base the entire game around that? And even Overwatch is like, hey, that's a pretty good idea. We'll put it in a low grav mode. But to be fair, and Overwatch is a great game. They didn't build their game around it.
And it's very different. I mean, these are two extremely different games.
Well, I mean, just the aesthetic alone, right? Overwatch has that kind of, Pixar kind of slightly cartoony style. We wanted to double down and say, hey, there's got to be a way to do a character-based shooter with abilities that's a core shooter that runs at a great frame rate that has a slightly more serious tone to it. It's like they have Winston, and I'm like, we're not the game to have the grill in the game. We have, the giant robots that can armor up. We have the girls that are essentially the jet and the gun at the same time. These kind of different type of aspirational characters, and blood. And you can explode people into jibs.
Sweet jibs.
There's not enough games where you can explode people into little bits these days.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not because I'm not a gorehound. It's a good feedback thing. When somebody's health is low and you slide in as the Wraith and you unload with your Spectre gun and you stab them in the face and they go, and you're like, that was really gratifying.
So give us a quick overview of these different classes and kind of the dynamics as they work together, because we're seeing some footage here. Yeah.
Well, so we have Law versus Breaker. So narrative-wise, it's asymmetrical, but they all play the same. So we're shipping with 9, but we're going to have more. I mean, I've already played the 10th back at the studio. We're not going to charge for future characters, maps, and modes.
Nice.
It's all, what you see is what you get, the $29.99 price point. But I mean, it starts every way. If you're your Enforcer, who's kind of your basic class, has an assault rifle, EMP, weapon, shoulder-mounted rocket launcher. You have your tanky classes, the Juggernaut. I mean, I could go through every single last one of them, but we'd be here all week.
Yeah.
The big message, though, here is that I challenged the design team when it came to game types, when it came to the characters and the roles. Don't do the same crap everybody else has.
Yeah.
Right.
So we don't have the dude with the bow. We don't have the gnome that builds turrets. We don't have the pretty girl with the healing ray. We have our own versions of that. Our healer is very much fire and forget. You get a heal, back to shooting.
Yeah.
Our tank drops a shield. They don't walk with it slowly. So we can get back to shooting. And the elephant in the room we always talk about is Overwatch being the great game, and that's cool. We look different, but also they're a character-based game with abilities that happens to be a shooter. We are first and foremost a shooter that then has characters and abilities.
Well, I think one thing you see in all character-based games is balancing being an issue. How's balancing been working out for you guys?
It's going to be hosed at launch.
Yeah.
It is not going to be a balanced game. We know that. We've seen that in the beta.
That's kind of fun, though,
But I mean, what happens is the game's going to come out, and all the gamers out there, they're going to find all this crap we didn't think of, because the game's been tested with thousands of people so far. What if it gets to hundreds of thousands, or hopefully millions, right?
Fingers crossed.
They're going to find
things. I think you got it. I think you'll get that.
And then we patch it as quick as we can. We fix it. We listen to the feedback. We look at the numbers behind the scenes, and then we trust our gut. We have many, many fights internally about it, which is game development. I got my first gray hair, and I plucked that out. And it's one of those things that you don't know. So, but the thing is, by the time the game's balanced after launch, we'll introduce the 10th role, and then it'll completely reshuffle
the deck.
And then the 11th role. Like, what we often do in game development also, we introduce a new weapon or character, is we deliberately make it a little overpowered. So anybody who was in the last beta saw that the Wraith was pretty OP. We're massaging it down a little bit.
But that's a new character, so people played it a lot as well for that reason.
Yeah, shiny and new.
But yeah, even with all that data and all that, it's not a science yet, right? It's not a gut feeling, right? We make mistakes, and then people are like, oh shit, right? And we sometimes have to hot fix it, like on the server, typing the numbers, like But that's cool, right? It's part of the games nowadays. It's all live, right?
Yeah.
We'll fix it live, is our saying.
There's something that where like people are unwilling to say, hey, we screwed up. Or sorry about that. Or like the ability to say like, oh, I don't know what that is.
That transparency is important, though.
I mean, I'm 42, you're 45. It's like once you hit past 30, you're like, I'm just going to be who I am, and I don't have to prove anything to anybody. And I think that kind of DNA carries through to the studio, where we'll be straightforward with people and like, here's the game we made. Give us your feedback. I would rather have people on forums yelling at us, calling me an asshole on my Twitter feed, than being indifferent and not commenting at all.
And don't care.
Apathy is horrible.
You make a great point here. Is game development, particularly on the multiplayer side, has really shifted a lot over the years. Now, you worked on the old UT days, so you guys were pretty good about adjusting stuff in the fly, but it's a little different. I mean, we had the Star Wars Battlefront 2 guys up here yesterday. By the way, that game is looking really good. I played it.
It does look tight.
It's tight. It's tight. And they have a whole vision. Like, the game is going to launch, and it's just going to live and evolve and grow. And they have, I think, a similar strategy, kind of like free DLC. They're not going to kind of divvy it up by DLC packs and things like that. Yep. So I'm just kind of curious, like, where do you think that's going to go in the future?
Well, I mean, it's good for the consumer because they can have the game that they play, but for the idea of owning multiple games, it worries me as a player.
Yeah.
Because, back in the day when World of Warcraft became a really big phenomenon, I talked to people like, oh, I work on this thing, Gears of War, and they're like, I play WoW. And I'm like, Do you play anything else? I play WoW.
Yeah.
And like, but everybody's jockeying for that. So I'm hoping we can carve out our own position in the first-person shooter market and keep it as a living product. You know, like I said, I've played Roll 10. I've played new maps that people haven't seen yet. And from a development standpoint, this is a challenge, and I'm sure the Battlefront developers are seeing this, of shipping a game, and then here's the team working on that, and you have to surgically try and pry a few people and resources away so that they can figure out what content's going to drop 2 or 3 months or sooner after launch. And just remind people like that, hey, we're listening, not only getting feedback, but there's going to be more stuff coming, so stick around. We also rewarded people who were in our betas with like little, you know, kick decals and character decals to say, hey, I was there. So like I say, you always, you know, walk before you run, practice your lines before you go on stage.
From a narrative perspective, the game does have fiction around it, but I'm curious about how you're tackling that. It doesn't have a single-player mode in a traditional sense, but tell me a little bit about your approach to that.
It doesn't have a single-player mode, and that's why we're charging $29.99. It's not this whole multiplayer, only $60 crap that you see a lot of, which I'm not a fan of. The way to tell a narrative in a multiplayer game is first through the characters' barks, the things they say when they spawn. We also have that thing where they talk to each other. Oh, nice kill, almost as good as Kintaro, Kintaro says, because if you refer to yourself in third person, you're probably an asshole. As well as like little things around the environment to kind of tell what's going on in the environment. We had that fantastic trailer that Blur did to the remix of Spirit in the Sky, where you kind of can see the personalities of the characters, where Kronos hands the briefcase to Nash, doesn't even look at him, just like, all right, let's do this, ultimate, right? And also we have other things that are planned that may be coming on YouTube soon to kind of tell the story in a slightly graphical novel style.
It's interesting to see narrative in some cases. Overwatch obviously does this too, but they blow it out of the game and it becomes this kind of meta, you know, mixed media kind of thing. It's a really interesting place.
Well, there's 2 degrees of it. There's the, you know, the casual fan who's like, oh, this character says, you know, death from above, fine, that's cool. Right. And then there's the Uber fan. You want the person who's like, well, actually, Tosca is from this part of Russia, and her history with the Syndicate is this, that, and the other. You know, you want that.
I feel like fans pretty much make the lore these days.
Well, we had you know, our first tattoo for this game. Like, there's this this guy, like, last night said he saw our Deadzo icon, which is the thing you see when you die in the game. This one, unhappy face. Oh, how did you do that?
On a shirt.
And he tweeted me last night. He's like, I'm gonna get a tattoo of that. I'm like, I will pay for that. So he went to Hollywood last night. It's $100. I'm gonna PayPal it to him. And it's like, okay, cool. And then we had him on another stream. He's like, oh, I have an Unreal tattoo on the back of my neck. And I'm like, oh, haha, where's your Gears tattoo? And then he goes like this. And I'm like, I'm like, is there a Jazz Jackrabbit on your butt or what? So we've been at this for a while, and you know, I unretired, and there are few things more gratifying than for us to start the studio, us, not you know, Epic or Sony or anything like that, and to come around the corner and to see the 50-foot banner on the side of the convention center, which is the only original game now. Everything else is a sequel. And then to see, you know, people in outfits, to see the line, and then the tattoo. It's like, you know, it's why I unretired. It's why I do this, honestly.
But then you were like, to hell with it. I'll just make a studio again, right?
Well, I mean, I was, you know, idling for a year and a half, and then he messages me. He's like, dude, what the hell are you doing? And I'm like, yeah, we should probably get back to work. And I mark my words, and, you know, to kiss his butt. He does so much at the studio that I could not have started the studio without him. And then he and I surrounded ourselves with so many talented people that like I said earlier, I'm willing to admit the crap that I don't know. You know, and then I fill in the gap with other people who do. Like, oh, Glico matchmaking. I'm like, I don't know what that is, but you know, Roman, our awesome programmer, got it to the point where us being a skill-based game, you know, when you play the game, it's roughly 50-50 when you win or lose. Whereas in the early alphas and betas, it was like 20%. Because you want that. You want the win-lose. Nobody likes a blowout. Right? So.
We are glad to have you back. I missed you when you were gone. So.
And I need more comic book recommendations, sir.
They're coming. They're coming. They're coming right after this segment. I got some good ones for you I think you're going to like. So we're almost out of time, but in our final moments, if there's one thing gamers need to know about Lawbreakers, what would you say that is?
It's skill-based. So him working on, you know, when he was working at Guerrilla and Sony on Killzone, I was working with Microsoft and Gears. There was this massive movement where it's like, oh, we need to get the casuals in there. Press A to take cover, or you know, press X to shoot, or whatever, right? Like all these little like stupid tool tips. Ego Raptor did this amazing video a while back where he's talking about how like Mega Man just let you learn it. Instead of like snake, press X, like no. We're the game. We're like, you know what? Here's your skill set. The matchmaking will work. Go learn it. Bring your A game and hop in, and maybe one day esport, who knows?
I mean, and I love that, Dark Souls and games like that have brought that back.
Well, that's what I've been saying. This is the Dark Souls of shooters.
Yeah, that's great. And before, it's so good to have you on the show. Right, real quick, horror movie recommendation, something people need to see. Go.
Oh God, what? The Witch.
That's a good one.
Good, and It Follows is one of the best horror movies of the last 10 years. I've rewatched It Follows about 15 times, and it holds up every time.
That's great. Cliff Bleszinski, we're all excited for Lawbreakers coming in August on PS4.
August 8th, $29.99, $39.99 if you want more skins.
I love it. Thank you so much for joining us. We got a lot more coming up on PlayStation Live for Me 3, so don't touch that dial.
PlayStation